Why was it once considered normal, even necessary, to treat poverty as a crime? This is the making of Britain, the story of how land, law and power shaped an island. In each episode, we trace a turning point that changed what Britain was and what it would become, the Britain that we know today. In 1834, Parliament passed the Poor Law Amendment Act, one of the most infamous pieces of legislation in British history. Its aim was simple: to reduce the cost of caring for the poor. But its effects, they reshaped society, hardened attitudes, and cast a long shadow over Britain's working classes for more than a century. I want to take you into that world to show how a single law changed how poverty itself was seen, from a misfortune to a moral failing. Before we can understand the 1834 Act, we need to look back. For over 2 centuries, England had lived under what was known as the Old Poor Law, established in 1601 under Elizabeth I. Each parish had a duty to look after its poor. The parish collected money through a local tax, the poor rate, and distributed relief in different forms: money, food, clothing, sometimes housing. It wasn't generous, but it was based on a principle that the parish, the local community, bore responsibility for its members. If you fell into hardship, you could ask the parish overseer for help. Sometimes you'd be given outdoor relief, aid while living at home. Sometimes a parish workhouse existed, though these were often small, local, and far less feared than what would come later. Let me introduce our thread through this story, the parish constable. He's not a policeman as we'd imagine today, more a part-time official, often a tradesman or farmer doing his year of service. His duties included keeping order, chasing down vagrants, and yes, dealing with the poor. Under the old poor law, our constable might escort a beggar back to their parish of origin, or ensure that the overseer recorded who was given relief. It wasn't perfect, but it was local, flexible, and rooted in the community. So why did it all collapse? Why did Britain decide poverty should be punished rather than relieved? The answer lies in the sheer transformation Britain went through in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. The Industrial Revolution was gathering pace. Rural families were moving to towns in search of work. Traditional village economies were breaking apart, and the cost of poor relief was spiralling. During the Napoleonic Wars, food prices soared. Many parishes introduced what became known as the Speenhamland system, subsidies that topped up wages to keep the poorest afloat. Employers could pay low wages knowing the parish would make up the difference. Unsurprisingly, this fueled resentment. The ratepayers paying for the poor relief felt they were subsidising lazy workers and stingy employers alike. Our parish constable, once dealing with a few cases of hardship each month, now finds himself overwhelmed. Families queue at the parish vestry demanding aid. Migrant labourers arrive from elsewhere hoping to claim support. Farmers complain their poor rates are bankrupting them. The system that worked for Elizabethan England no longer worked for industrial Britain. But when reform came, it didn't aim to ease poverty, it aimed to stop it being encouraged. But how do you discourage poverty? That's where the infamous 1834 Act comes in. The Royal Commission on the Poor Laws, set up in 1832, painted a damning picture. The old system, it claimed, rewarded idleness and undermined the moral fabric of the nation. The solution, they argued, was to make relief less attractive than the lowest form of labour. This became the guiding principle of the workhouse test. The Poor Law Amendment Act of 1834 created central poor law unions, grouping parishes together. Each union was required to build a workhouse. Outdoor relief for the able-bodied poor was abolished. If you wanted help, you had to enter the workhouse. And the workhouse was deliberately designed to be harsh. Families were separated, men, women and children were divided, sometimes never seeing each other again. Diets were monotonous and meagre. Gruel became the symbol. Labour was made degrading, stone breaking, occam picking, mindless, endless tasks. Our parish constable now takes on a new role. Instead of escorting the poor back to their village, he delivers them to the workhouse gate. His once flexible decisions about who might deserve outdoor relief are gone. The law is rigid. If you're poor and need help, you enter the workhouse or you starve. The law had effectively criminalised poverty. But how did the public react? The Poor Law Amendment Act sparked outrage in many communities. Riots broke out in the northern towns. In Huddersfield, protesters tore down the new Poor Law Union building. In the south, rural labourers who had once relied on parish relief saw the workhouse as a monstrous betrayal. Cartoonists had a field day, portraying the new Poor Law commissioners as callous tyrants. Charles Dickens in Oliver Twist seared the workhouse in the public imagination, a place where little boys begged for more gruel and families were torn apart. But perhaps most telling was the quiet resistance. Many parish constables, overseers and even local magistrates simply ignored the rules, continuing to give small amounts of outdoor relief because the alternative seemed too cruel. Still, the law endured, and the workhouse became a defining feature of Victorian Britain. But did it solve the problem of poverty? The short answer is no. Poverty didn't disappear, but the law reframed it. Instead of being a misfortune, poverty became a stigma. To be poor was to be suspect, lazy, feckless, morally weak. The workhouse loomed in the background as a constant threat. Fall too low, and that's where you'd go. Our parish constable finds himself changed too. Once a mediator between parish and poor, he's now an enforcer of exclusion. He doesn't need to decide who deserves help. The law already decided they don't. And this attitude that poverty was a failing persisted long after the workhouses emptied. Even into the 20th century, the phrase going to the workhouse haunted the working classes. But why did the law survive so long? Why did a system so hated remain in force until 1930? Part of the answer lies in its usefulness to those in power. The workhouse system didn't eradicate poverty, but it did discipline the poor. It reinforced hierarchies. It kept wages low. It reassured taxpayers that they weren't subsidising idleness. The law also evolved. Some workhouses became hospitals. Others became homes for the elderly or infirm. By the late 19th century, reformers pushed for more humane treatment and outdoor relief crept back in. But the stigma never really disappeared. Our parish constable, now imagined in the 1890s, might be escorting an elderly widow into a union house, a renamed workhouse. The system still grinds on, even if softened at the edges. It would take the rise of the welfare state in the 20th century to finally break the chain. But the legacy of 1834 lingers even today. Think of the language still used in debates about welfare: undeserving poor, benefits scroungers. These ideas have deep roots in the Poor Law Amendment Act. So when poverty is still debated in terms of morality rather than misfortune, we're hearing echoes of 1834. The Poor Law Amendment Act of 1834 didn't just change policy, it changed attitudes. It told Britain that poverty was not something to be relieved, but something to be punished. It turned the parish constable into an enforcer and the poor into suspects. And its shadow still lies across us. Whenever we ask whether the poor deserve help, we're speaking the language of that law. Thank you for walking a little further down the road that made Britain with me. The story winds on. Try this one, for instance. I think you'll like it. Until then, thanks so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you very soon.